local economies. The banks participating in this listening sessions are members of the American Bankers Association and the Independent Community Bankers of America. A full participant list is available to those who are interested. Yesterday, I noted the continued signs of good news in our economy in terms of hiring, and the morning reports showed that consumer comfort has risen to the highest level in a decade. I'm sure last night you also saw the report that illegal southwest border crossings are down by an extraordinary 40%, a significant deviation even when you consider the seasonal trends. These measures reflect that both the economy and the border are already responding to the president's agenda, even while we're still in the beginning stages of putting his policies in place. The country and the world are clearly ready and waiting for the change that the president campaigned on and is already delivering. Right now, the president is holding a legislative affairs lunch with OMB Director Mulvaney and key members of Congress on his plans for the federal budget and repeal and replace that we've talked about. This is just the latest opportunity to continue the dialogue between the president and members on Capitol Hill on turning his ambitious agenda into action. The strong relationship between the president and congressional leaders will be key as the budget process moves along. As Director Mulvaney has been saying, our budget blueprint will be released in mid-March, and the president is working collaboratively with both his cabinet and Congress to create a budget that keeps the president's promises to secure the country and make the most efficient use of taxpayer money. In attendance at the meeting from Capitol Hill are Senator Crapo, the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, Chairman Cochran, the Senate chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Senator Mike Enzi, the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, Senator Bob Corker of the Senate, the member of the Senate Budget Committee, Congresswoman Black, the chairman of the House Budget Committee, Congressman Thornberry, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio, Congressman Meadows of North Carolina, the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, and Congressman Rokita of Indiana. Later this afternoon, the president will meet with former Secretary of Commerce Pete Peterson. Then the president has a meeting with Secretary of Homeland Security Kelly and the director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo. And finally, the president will make remarks to the Senate Youth Program around 4 o'clock today, a tradition that began with President Kennedy and has continued through every administration. The president's honored to be speaking to this distinguished group of young men and women who are interested in pursuing careers in public service. I also want to mention that right about now, the vice president is giving the keynote remarks at the Latino Coalition's Policy Summit. His remarks focus on the particularly negative impact of Obamacare on small businesses, many of who've been unable to hire more workers or were forced to scale down their operation due to high taxes and burdensome requirements that were imposed by the law. The president is dedicated to improving health care system for every American, including small business owners who've especially have had to suffer through complying with thousands of pages of regulations and rules. That's exactly why he's working with Congress to enact the American Health Care Act, which he was glad to wake up this morning and see approved by the House Ways and Means Committee. Also today, the president was pleased to see his ambassador to Israel, David Freeman, voted out of committee. We had hoped to see Seema Verma, who would be confirmed as the administrator this week as the administrator of health centers for Medicare and Medicaid services at the Department of Health, state Medicaid agencies, state health departments, state departments of insurance, as well as private companies and foundations. She's unquestionably and uniquely qualified for her position, and especially now that health reform is at the top of the president's agenda, it's time to get her in place. This delay by Senate Democrats at this critical time is unacceptable. On a scheduling note for the weekend, the vice president announced yesterday that he'll be in Louisville, Kentucky on Saturday with Governor Bevin. The vice president's office will have further details for you on that trip as we get closer. Finally, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that today is the 10-year anniversary of the disappearance of former FBI agent Robert Levinson from Kish Island, Iran. The Trump administration remains unwavering in our commitment to locate Mr. Levinson and bring him home. The Levinson family has suffered far too long, and we will not rest until his case is resolved. And with that, I'll take your questions. Hallie Jackson.
I got a couple of topics for you, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Julian Assange says the CIA has lost control of its entire cyber weapons arsenal. Does the president agree?
I think, as we've commented before, there's grave concern that the president has about the release of national security and classified information that threatens and undermines our nation's security. Obviously, he believes that the systems at the CIA are outdated and need to be updated. We are not commenting on the current situation as is U.S. government policy, but I think the situation technology-wise at the CIA, the president's acknowledged, needs to be updated. The CIA put out a statement regarding the current situation, and I would refer you to that.
Two just follow-ups on that. Is he going to talk about that with Mike Pompeo today?
He gets a daily briefing from the director, and I'm not privy to the contents of his discussion, but obviously issues of national security, including that, are probably something that gets discussed.
And then some Republicans have said Julian Assange should be in prison. Does the president agree?
I think the U.S. government's had a position on Julian Assange's position in the past, and I don't see anything that's changed that. He has compromised in the past and undermined our national security, and I think I'll leave it up to the Department of Justice to further comment on their disposition of him.
John. The second topic was on healthcare.
Second topic is like
two topics. So,
interview, not a press conference.
The president tweeted just a little bit ago that he believes that healthcare is coming along great. We've also been watching Paul Ryan deliver a pretty lengthy PowerPoint presentation aimed at convincing Republicans to get on board this plan. Isn't that a sign that healthcare is not actually coming along great?
I think anybody who's been in Washington for a few days or longer recognizes that any major piece of legislation takes a lot of explanation. The president's been very committed to talking to members of Congress. He had another meeting last night. Something as complicated as this that deals with 1/5 of our economy, and there was a major takeover of our healthcare system, isn't a simple thing. It's a major, complicated piece of legislation that's got three prongs to it, and this is the first one, the reconciliation piece that starts to chip away at finally repealing Obamacare. When they passed Obamacare, they rushed it so quick. They gave the then Secretary of Health and Human Services great authority to enact certain aspects of it. That would be our phase two, is having Secretary Price go through the pieces of Obamacare that he has been given the authority to when they passed it, to help unwind a lot of the things they did. And then phase three is stuff that has to be done through other pieces of legislation that does stuff like allow people to sell insurance across state lines, that allows small businesses to pool. So there's a lot of facets to getting this pushed through, and I think that one of the things that we've been able to do quite effectively is talk to members, especially in the House, but the Vice President's been very active on both sides of the chambers, or both chambers, to communicate how this is a comprehensive strategy in three prongs to repeal and replace it with something more effective.
Will you, for example, roll back Medicaid expansion freezing until 2018?
Now, look, Hallie, I think this is going through the process of it's working its way through Ways and Means. Today there's a markup in the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and I think that's where we're going to continue to see action in the House. And then when it goes to the Senate, the President will continue to engage very actively with the House and the Senate to get this done.
Sean, what is...
I didn't call. We'll have plenty of time.
Thank you, Sean. New York City First Lady Chirlane McCray said in a statement that Donald Trump should keep his hands off women's bodies, women's health care, and Planned Parenthood, which has done just fine without President Trump's advice. I wanted to know what the response from the White House was on this.
Well, I mean, with respect to Planned Parenthood, specifically, the president's very clear that he's pro-life. We've worked with them to talk about making sure that there's a difference between taxpayer funding of abortion and women's health services. We have, and the president has committed to making sure that funds for women health community centers is going to be reflected by a substantial increase in his budget. He's committed to doing that, and he's trying to figure out a way to make sure that the focus of taxpayer money is spread towards community centers that provide vital health services to women, and that we're not using taxpayer funds for abortion. John Roberts.
Just want to follow